Blackpool is a beach town little known outside the UK, which conjures fond memories for some and is ridiculed by others, despite getting millions of tourists per year. I visited recently during off-season, and as a foreigner I enjoyed its living history intertwined with that of Britain's working class, and its interesting and inexpensive pubs and hotels. Here's my take on the pool. One night during the late 80s, I was in the middle of a short trip to London. I'd missed the last train back to my friend's place, and as I waited for over an hour for a bus on Trafalgar Square, an old Northern Englishman struck up a conversation with me. He told me the next time I came to England I should go to Blackpool, which he said was the most beautiful city in the world. Later, when I told my English friends about this, they just laughed. Blackpool is another shithole, one of them said. The guy must have been drunk out of his mind. I'm just walking down the street, a random street here. As you can see, the houses are really nice. And this is farther back from the beach. I had to go to the NHS because our prescription ran out. So I was in and out in an hour for free. It's something you don't have much of in the US. But anyway, I'd like to just talk a little bit about Blackpool, and I'll run some film footage I shot here. Blackpool is the world's first working class vacation destination town. It was founded, well, it was a fishing village, but in the 1840s, when textile factories in places like Manchester and other towns used to, they started closing for a week to do maintenance. And they'd send their employees off for a week, and people started coming to spend that week on a beach. So it's the first beachside resort town ever built around working class holidaymakers, and it still has that reputation to this day, which is probably one of the reasons people make fun of it. You know, a lot of people love it. It's also the most popular tourist destination in the UK. This is something that sets it apart from all other so-called towns in decline in England. Last year, over 20 million people visited Blackpool. It's got a reputation as a place that's seen better days that's now run down, kind of like an American Gary, Indiana, or Erie, Pennsylvania or something. A city that used to be important, that made people proud, which has seen better times. So you see a lot of videos going around made by people who only film in the worst possible places in Blackpool, who try to use it as a metaphor for a decaying UK. But the fact is, you could make films like that anywhere. And most US cities have a lot more problems than Blackpool. For example, I was born in St. Louis. In 1950, it had a population of 900,000. Today it has around 300,000. For all the talk about Blackpool's decline, in 1950 it had 147,000 residents, and today it has 141,000. One thing that did cause some decline here was the advent of cheap airline package holidays. Now with companies like Ryanair, you can fly to a Spanish beach or a Greek beach for almost nothing. And so with the emergence of these package holidays in the 70s, people started changing the way that they came to Blackpool. Instead of whole families taking vacations here for a couple of weeks during the summertime, most people now seem to come for a weekend or an extended holiday. It's only about an hour and a half by train from Liverpool or Manchester, and they'll come down for a few days or even just for a Saturday night pub crawl or party.
Everyone raise your hands in the air! Come on! Searching for a star,
It's gotten popular with stag parties and hen parties, and whole families still come down from places like Glasgow because there's a lot of kids attractions too. But it has an entire leisure infrastructure that was built up from the Victorian age forwards that makes it really special. The most famous landmark in Blackpool is unquestionably the Blackpool Tower. built in 1893 and roughly the size of a 45-story building. It was Britain's answer to the Eiffel Tower, and it's about half the height, but for decades it was the tallest structure in the British Empire, and it's not merely a tower. The massive building at its base contains, among other things, a Victorian ballroom and a one-ring circus that's been going on every day since 1893. I went there, and the clown who was co-emceeing the event told us that he's a 9th-generation clown. Both his father and his grandfather were also clowns at the Blackpool Circus. As I walk around, I get the feeling that some of the blight may have been generated on purpose to manipulate real estate values. Real estate speculators will often buy up and run down properties on purpose to create the impression of blight to justify public subsidies for slum clearance and the kinds of scorched earth construction projects that were popular in American cities in the 1970s and 80s, like Cleveland, which tore down a bunch of historic buildings to build parking lots and garages. I've heard that during the last few decades, many small hotels were converted to studio apartments and used to house substance abuse and psychiatric patients from around northwest England, near the city centre, where all kinds of mega construction projects seem to be underway. A cynic would say that this was a great way to lower the price of eminent domain. Back to my trip though, I've been here for 4 days, and there's just a lot of stuff to do. I'm leaving without getting to do everything I wanted to. I went to the circus, I went up in the tower, I went to a really nice play at the Grand Theatre last night. It was a kind of modern dance performance to the tune of Test Department, the industrial band from the 1980s, and it was really good. I've been drinking a bit, and there's a surprisingly wide variety of pubs here. They're classic English pubs like the Meter, which is the smallest pub in Blackpool, founded in 1901. Really good cask ales on tap like Black Sheep, which is my favorite bitters I've had so far in the UK. There are a couple of bars with live rock, like the Galleon. There's a place that has a horror movie theme. I can't remember the name off the top of my head right now, just walking down the street like this, but one thing that made me decide to come here is that it's just by far one of the cheapest places in England. I had to go to London for a work-related issue. I got a free ticket, and I asked my boss to let me stay another week. I was looking around at prices, and I couldn't afford to stay in London. To give you an idea, I spent 2 nights in a room with a shared bathroom above a grocery store in London for £138 a night. I've stayed in 2 different little hotels here in Blackpool with breakfast included for £30 a night, with bathrooms in the room. You can get pints in Blackpool for £1.80, when the average pint of beer in London is over £6 now. The kind of blight English people complain about here, it's nothing compared to Cleveland or St. Louis or Detroit or anything like that in the US. And there is some blight. There's some people asking for money on the streets. I haven't seen one police officer since I've been here. It doesn't seem like... I understand the murder rate's like 5 per 100,000 compared to like 52 per 100,000 in St. Louis or something. So despite people talking about it being dodgy, obviously you have to be careful anywhere, but it's not comparable with US cities really. And it just has a lot of history. Like some people from Blackpool who I was speaking to in some of the pubs, some of them were telling me that this is the Las Vegas of England because they have casinos here. I just was telling everyone, man, this is a lot better than Las Vegas. Las Vegas is a recently constructed city that was laid out entirely for automobile traffic. Blackpool was built up before auto traffic in the Victorian age. It has 3 beautiful wooden piers jutting into the Irish Sea. And it's the first city in the world that ever had electric streetlights, to name a few things. Another thing I really like about Blackpool is, they say that people are more friendly in northern England than they are in the south, in London and places like that. I was traveling by myself, and I couldn't sit in a pub for more than 15 or 20 minutes without someone striking up a conversation with me. I was in the Galleon Rock Bar, and one night 2 different groups of friends not only invited me to sit down with them and talk, but they invited me to go out with them to other pubs, other clubs and stuff, and I was just like, no, I want to see the band, but thanks for the invite. That doesn't happen in a lot of big cities around the world when you're a guy in his 50s sitting by himself in a bar. And I found that, like, especially at the Galleon, the age range and the range of different types of people was really great. I didn't feel out of place being a 58-year-old man. There's a way that people address each other in Northern England that I like. Everybody calls each other love. I'm not going to try and imitate the accent, but it's a shortened version of, "Are you all right, love?" That's how people say hi. It's just like really friendly. So I don't think that these YouTube video makers who portray Blackpool as the symbol of Great Britain's decline are acting in good faith. This is still a really popular tourist town, and there's a lot of investment going on. There's a £350 million public university campus being built, unfortunately ripping down a couple blocks of historic Victorian age row houses. It could have been done better, but it's happening. And there's also a neighborhood that's been themed as the Rainbow Village, where dozens of LGBTQ+ business people have bought and renovated old row houses and restaurants, bars and hotels, and it's turned into a local development anchor of its own with lots of drag shows and street parties. So I think there is a future for Blackpool, especially with global climate change causing more sunny days every year. I arrived on a Saturday in the middle of a gale, Storm Amy, and there were still thousands of tourists there having a good time and drinking. It must be a madhouse during the high season, probably too crowded to even enjoy. Apparently the population triples there every summer. As for me, my expectations for Blackpool were exceeded in everything I did. The circus was better than I thought it would be. I just went there to kill time, and it was actually really nice. The tower was better than I thought it would be. The football match was better than I thought it would be. If anything, just for the fans singing about how they sucked so bad. The food was fine. The drinks were super cheap. I know it's not on many people's bucket list, especially people who aren't from the UK. But if you are over there for whatever reason and you have a few days and it's off season, I definitely believe it would be worth checking out if you're not bothered by the weather and you're interested in this kind of stuff.